While all the voters' attention is distracted by the war against Iran, Donald Trump has simply decided, to cancel the US congressional elections. US President Donald Trump has stepped up his campaign to spread his false claims about widespread election fraud by signing on Tuesday, March 31, an executive order of questionable constitutionality aimed at creating a nationwide citizen registry that will determine voting rights and restrict mail-in voting in the states. The point is that Trump is usurping power because now he and his puppet ministry, and it will not be the individual states that decide who has the right to vote and who does not, and exactly how elections should be conducted across all of America. In fact, Trump decided to take personal control of the elections, which seriously violates the US Constitution. But that's not all. Let's figure this out now. Because Trump signed a crucial executive order that could significantly change electoral law in the US. I'm Pechiy, let's discuss this together. But before we start this episode, as usual, I ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or a channel membership using the links and details in the description of this video. I will be grateful for any support you can give, and you can do this at the end of the episode if you find it interesting and useful for you. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News, the link to it is in the description of this video. So, Donald Trump, he signed a very interesting executive order about the elections in the US the other day, which went unnoticed because everyone is distracted by the war against Iran. Trump admitted that the executive order, which appeared at the time when the bill he is promoting to limit mail-in voting is stuck in Congress, might, he says, face legal obstacles. It should be noted right away that any US president, whether it's Trump, Biden, Kennedy, and so on, does not have constitutional authority. When it comes to elections, many aspects of the executive order are difficult to implement. The president in the US does not have the right to interfere in the electoral process at all, but Trump doesn't care about that. Trump's executive order instructs the US Department of Homeland Security to create a so-called national list of citizens based on data from citizenship and naturalization registries, social security records, and other federal databases. According to the executive order, federal officials are required to provide this list to election commissions. The executive order also instructs the Attorney General to prioritize prosecuting election officials who provide ballots to voters who are not eligible to vote according to these lists. Who has the right to vote and who does not will be decided personally by Donald Trump and his hand-picked Department of Homeland Security. In addition, the executive order requires the US Postal Service not to deliver ballots to individuals who are not included in this very list, and citizens who will be listed according to Donald Trump's rules. Election experts and Democratic election officials at the state level have already rejected Trump's directive as legally invalid. Officials in Arizona and Oregon have promised to challenge this order in court, and here is a quote from Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes. The Constitution does not allow the executive branch to take over the management of elections. That is the responsibility of state legislatures or Congress. So I don't think this will pass any kind of judicial review. So it's a huge waste of time and an attempt by the Trump administration to attract attention. The biggest threat to American elections is Donald Trump's lies about them. Trump has long focused on mail-in voting to support his baseless claims of massive election fraud. On Tuesday, he repeated himself again. Here is that false statement about fraud during mail-in voting. Election fraud in the United States of America does happen, of course. You can't say that they are saints and infallible. Yes, it does happen. But Donald Trump's constant claims about large-scale election fraud, I emphasize, have never been proven or confirmed. Here, I draw your attention to the fact that Donald Trump has once again been president of the United States for more than a year now. Donald Trump has been in power for more than a year, and aside from loud verbal statements that the election was stolen from him and all that blah 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 about fraud, he isn't doing anything. For more than a year, he has had government agencies under his control that could have already gathered all the evidence of the alleged large-scale violations and presented them to the public. Show it to the voters, and Trump could come out and say, look, I was right. I told you there were large-scale violations. Here they are. But for some reason, Trump isn't doing that. He only talks about how the election was stolen from him. This is where Trump's supporters should think about why this is happening. Once again, all the power is currently in Trump's hands. So start investigations and show voters. I checked for a year. I said there were major violations. Here they are. Take a look. Where is all of this? For some reason, there isn't any. Well, it's also important to note that the US Constitution does not grant the executive branch any clear authority over elections. It gives broad powers over elections to the states, including, which is very important, the time, place, and manner of voting. And it states that Congress can pass laws regulating elections. And I would also remind you that the courts largely blocked Trump's previous executive order, signed last year, which, among other changes, required documentary proof of citizenship for voting. And in January, a federal judge prohibited the US President's administration from withholding federal election funding from states that do not change their voting procedures in accordance with Trump's requirements. Trump insisted, saying he required voting to be done this way. If any state disagrees, then you won't get a penny of funding. The court said that if you do this, you'll have problems, but Trump in fact apparently doesn't care about the laws or the Constitution. Because Trump's statement that the government is creating a national list of citizens came at a time when his administration faced significant difficulties trying to create the so-called National Voter Database. The U.S. Department of Justice tried to obtain private, unredacted voter lists from almost every state in the country, but as it turned out, only 12 states agreed to provide such information, because no one is required to give such information to Trump. Attempts to force at least 29 states to hand over their voter lists through lawsuits were unsuccessful. Judges tell Trump to calm down and say he can't do this. It's funny that even some Republican-controlled states, specifically Utah, Oklahoma, and West Virginia, were among those that resisted the demands of the Department of Justice. Even the Republicans are saying, Trump, you're doing something ridiculous right now. Election officials note that any nationwide voter list is likely to be full of errors, since voter rolls in each individual state are updated daily. They change when voters move, become citizens, turn 18, die, get married, and so on and so on. As soon as a nationwide list is created, it will be outdated at that very moment. It's impossible to update it daily the way individual states do. It's interesting that Trump has been insisting for several weeks that Congress pass a bill that would allow the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to receive voter lists and remove those they don't like. But passing such a law is unrealistic. And you remember that Trump is fiercely opposed to mail-in voting, and here I'll give you some numbers. According to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, during the 2024 election in which Donald Trump won, every third American voted by mail. That's 37% of Democrats and 24% of Republicans, and the funniest thing is, at the beginning of this month, US President Donald Trump himself voted by mail in the special elections in Florida. But Trump publicly calls for a ban on this method of voting, even though he uses it himself. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful. You can do so using the links and details in the description of this video. There are different platforms there: Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, PayPal, bank details, cryptocurrencies, YouTube sponsorship. Choose whichever option is most convenient for you. I would appreciate your support. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.